My name is Andreas Welsch. After 23 years in the software industry at SAP in different roles around AI, I'm now an independent AI advisor. I'm a thought leader. I think a lot about what does all of this AI actually mean that we read and see in the news. You know, just this week, if you followed the news, DeepSeek was the big thing. Last week, it was agents. The week before, it was artificial general intelligence. I'm getting dizzy. I don't know about you. So what does it actually mean, right? Fine, there are lots of technology companies that are coming out with the things, but how do we implement them in a business in a way that delivers measurable and meaningful business value? Because you might see that your senior leaders, your executives might ask you, what's our AI strategy? We need to figure this out. We need to figure out what agents are and how we use them. But unless you're really connected with the business, with business goals, with measurable goals, making it tangible, a lot of times it's a lofty strategy that ends again somewhere in the drawer, or even if your company invests or you invest, you might not see the results that you could see. So I see it as my mission to help others in the community, aspiring leaders, current leaders, figuring out where and how can we actually use AI in our company and do that in a way that we do see returns. So one of my favorite quotes is, in AI and game shows, timing is critical. Right? If you think about, again, the news over the last couple of weeks, we've seen this time and again. Timing of news, timing of making investments, and you see the same thing in your company too. Because it's not all just about being the first, right? And it's also difficult if you're the last, right? If you're the first and you buzz in, maybe you don't even have a good answer. And if you wait too long, your competitors have already gone before you and they've given their answer, and you're late. So timing is really, really critical. Now, 2 weeks ago, right, AGI was the big thing. We hear leaders of OpenAI, of Anthropic, and many, many other companies talk about their version of artificial general intelligence. And it's not the first time that we're seeing this in the news, right? We've seen this time and again over all the decades of AI research, development, high expectations what all this technology can do. And then when the rubber meets the road, we see, well, actually it's not that simple. Actually, it cannot do all the things that we thought it could, or that marketing promised. By the way, that's where tech marketing gets a bad reputation. But I see myself in 2055, for example, telling my grandchildren, yeah, AGI, right? They've been talking about this every decade. So, but there's a way that, again, we can help implement this software. So look at Sam Altman, right? A couple of weeks ago on his personal blog, he said, hey, this will be the year where we see the first AI agents actually join the workforce, change the workforce. And again, if you read the tech blogs, if you read the news, agents are this year's hype topic and big thing. Last year was Generative AI. Before that was ChatGPT. Before that, it was like, is machine learning still a thing? Do we still do that, right? So every year, obviously, there is some kind of a topic that tech companies talk about. You might have seen Satya Nadella's quote, again, a couple of weeks ago, SaaS is going away, software as a service. We'll see a lot more Agentic AI take over what SaaS is doing. So forget about SaaS. By the way, Microsoft sells agents, so how about buy ours? But I think, just prospectively, there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of truth to it that over time we'll see these agents be adopted more and deliver more value. But right now it's still relatively nascent. But when we do, I think it changes a lot of paradigms. And that's what, again, gets me excited, thinking about what does it mean if you lead a team, if you're part of a team, and all of a sudden there are these agents that are supposed to help you do data analysis better, do your SEO keyword research better, write a blog post for you. Not just one, maybe 5 or 10 or 5 different variations. What does that actually mean? But whether it's Sam Altman, Satya Nadella, or take any other tech executive, actually, if you work in a business, you don't need more AI. Right? Even if everybody tells you you need to look at agents, you need to do all these things, we don't need more AI. What I believe we need is actually better prepared AI leadership. So leadership that has a foundational understanding of, yes, what are the trends, what is happening in the industry, but also can contextualize it. What does it mean in our industry, in our business, in my business function? How do you use this in finance? How do you use that in HR? On the operational side, right? When we think about building solutions, first of all, why are we building them? What are the business drivers? What are the KPIs that we attach these solutions to? So we know what that measurable business value should actually be. So it's not just happier employees or fewer clicks that you make. And the last part, I think we've seen this already during predictive analytics and machine learning. We all have a responsibility as data professionals, practitioners, data scientists, to make sure that we mitigate the impact and foresee the impact to the extent that we can, and reduce bias, are conscious of bias, our own bias in the data, and things like that. So over the last 4 years, I've run a podcast called What's the Buzz? AI in Business, where I've interviewed more than 60 AI leaders and experts. There's usually an episode every other week, sometimes once a week. And I've identified 9 dimensions throughout those more than 60 conversations that I'll briefly touch on today. I also wrote a book called the AI Leadership Handbook. You can take a look at that after the session. But like I said, as a leader, you need to understand what is happening in the market. What are the big trends? But how do I make them relevant in my business? You need to align your AI strategy with your business strategy. It's not just about chasing AI as a technology, but how can this technology be used in a way that it contributes to generating more revenue, cutting costs, improving customer satisfaction, reducing time in collections until we get the money, days of sales outstanding, things like that, business KPIs. We've seen central leadership roles emerge. Last year, for example, the federal government was in the news that they are hiring 400 chief AI officers. What in the world is a chief AI officer? 2 years ago, right, the title didn't exist. Right? And by the way, most likely they'll face a similar fate as the chief data officer and the chief digital officer and the chief transformation officer. So it's a transformational and transitional role. But many businesses need that central role to help guide the organization, enable teams, show them what is possible with AI on the technical side, but also, how do we actually work with these tools? How do you use them? So that's where leadership comes in. Many of you are probably in product roles, and when I've worked with customers at SAP, large Fortune 500s, a lot of times we thought in projects. Can you help come and do this thing, develop this model, put this in production? But when you actually look at it, projects, they have a linear timeline, right? They have a start date, they have an end date. Products, on the other hand, they have an end user, right? So you change your mindset and put the user at the center of what you do. You have a roadmap, not just a timetable to get done and throw this over the fence and then somebody else has to worry about it. So we need to adapt how we think about AI, not just as a project, a one and done kind of thing, but something that continuously lives on, that gets new features that we need to improve, that we need to look at and nurture and expand. So product mindset, big thing. Culture. Many organizations, last year, for example, were buying Microsoft Copilot licenses and dumped them on people's desks, more or less. Now you're more effective and more efficient, right? Maybe 10 times, maybe 5 times, who knows? But we cannot just give tools to employees and expect that they will be more productive. So we need to nurture that culture of innovation, of why are we doing this? Here's how you can use these tools, and build education enablement around them too. Collaboration. I used to be in IT for 14 years. For the longest time, I didn't even know what the company was doing. I didn't care about it that much, right? Until I started meeting some colleagues from sales, and from marketing, and from finance, and in other areas. So a lot of times, my experience has been when you're in a technical role, that's where you are, that's where you focus. But the business is so far away. But actually, when you bring business experts and stakeholders together with technical teams, that's where the learning happens, right? You learn about the business, what do we actually do, and what matters to you, what are the KPIs that you're measured on, and you put this in context of how can I actually help you with the technology that exists, and with what I know and what we know, how we can use the technology, and vice versa. There's a bit of AI literacy and increasing that literacy in the business happening. Oh, I didn't know we could do that. So maybe the next time they run into a problem, they can either call you or maybe even are at a point where they can think about how can we use technology to solve that. So collaboration, big one. Ethics and privacy. But we've seen so many examples over the years from bias in resumes. With Amazon as an example, 2018. If you're male, Caucasian, you went to a certain school, you play lacrosse, those are the people that seem to flourish. What about anyone else? Right? So luckily, Amazon stopped that program after they realized that. Or the city of Rotterdam, they was using protected features and information about people to decide whether they were eligible for social welfare or whether it looks like they were committing fraud. Single mothers of multiple children were affected, again, by this model because it was biased. They were not committing fraud, but the way it was constructed. So we see these examples and certainly have a responsibility. Technology obviously plays a huge role from what are the latest kinds of technology, what are the latest models, the latest methods from prompting and prompting strategies. We've moved to fine-tunings, and well, fine-tuning is actually very costly. You do need data scientists again. Well, what about this thing, retrieval augmented generation? You pull data from the documents you have, you build a better prompt. Right? So there's this continuous evaluation. Technology obviously plays a key part, but we need to understand how we put this in context. And then the last part, security. Does anybody remember the Chevy truck that sold for $1? Well, because somebody used a chatbot that was built on large language models, and the customer tricked the chatbot into apparently selling the Chevy truck for $1. Or right? So security. Maybe you don't want to expose certain kinds of data through that chatbot, or maybe you do need to do some kind of red teaming or testing. So, anyways, to me, all that comes together. We need better AI leadership. Now, if you're a leader or if you're in the industry, to me, that's what it feels like. Right? You're barely hanging on. So much news. Every day there's something new. Every week there's a new news cycle. Why we're headed into that dystopian future, or why we're headed into a super prosperous future. What does all of that mean? So holding on, right? Now, these principles of staying on top of the technology and these 9 principles that I mentioned, they also apply now that we're looking at agents, right? Agents as a new kind of software that can take a goal that you define as a user and break that goal down into sub-goals and tasks, much like you or I would structure a task. They work on these tasks individually, come back to you with a more structured response, and you, as a user, can evaluate, is that something that I want to execute on and accept, or do I send this agent back and have it do something else? And I think I was having a good conversation with somebody earlier, and she said, hey, I work in machine learning, I don't work in AI. So I said, well, I think you do work in AI. But machine learning is maybe not the fancy term everybody wants to hear and wants to talk about right now. So to me, the interesting part is how we've moved from classifying, predicting data, predicting analytics, machine learning, to identifying, generating information, to now creating and interpreting. What do you see? Right? Can you describe what's in that image? What makes this a funny meme? ChatGPT did a really good job at another one that I'll show you in a couple of minutes. All the way now to this reasoning and execution. So we are advancing in these capabilities from mainly plotting out what is the trend going to look like, what does the demand look like 3 months from now, 6 months to now, to categorizing, classifying, is this a document, yes, is this a contract, is this a purchase order, a sales order, something else, to generating content, images, text, video, audio, to now having AI that can actually reason and do things. Not just say, here's what I would do, but in many cases you can also say, okay, go do it, right? If you follow the news, OpenAI's Operator seems to be one of those examples. Go book a flight, and you can watch it. It's painfully slow at the moment, but you can watch it, click through it on the website and book that flight or book that hotel for you. Now fast forward 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, right? It will very likely not be that slow anymore, and it will do many, many more things. So all of a sudden, software not just only supports us, but it can really do things on our behalf. So in my mind, we're moving from defining what this should do, think about rules. If this happens, then do that, to accelerating things with with RPA, robotics process automation. Every morning at 9 o'clock, I want you to log into this vendor invoice portal. I want you to download the latest invoices, save them here, copy and paste the information into my ERP system, and then you're done until the next morning. To predicting, right? What are customers most likely to buy? What are products that we should recommend because they want to buy them? To now implementing what AI actually proposes. Don't just tell me where demand is going to be. Eventually, reroute the products, optimize my supply chain. Again, it sounds very futuristic, and it is at the moment, but I've been convinced within a matter of quarters, within a matter of a couple of years, we will get there. Right? So a lot more automation. Now, that was in the news, obviously, a lot this week. DeepSeek, it's cluttered my LinkedIn feed. Probably the same. But I think there's a silver lining, and actually something that's really, really interesting. So if you look at economics, there's a paradox called Jevons paradox after a British economist, Jevon, who said or who observed that as the cost decreases for a product, the consumption actually increases. That holds true for fuel, energy, some other resources, and I'm convinced that it does the same here as well for AI. So you will see if the cost drops to use LLMs, if it gets more economic to run them, if the large AI labs drop their prices because they need to, because only the first one needs to come out and drop the price, everybody else needs to follow. There should be a lot of innovation possible by anybody, not just the big ones that can now invest, that now already have the deep pockets, that are maybe building their own infrastructure, but by companies that don't even exist today because it's affordable and attainable. I'll come back to this in a second. So recently, BCG came out with a study and with a report, and they said, hey, we surveyed leaders, and we see that they invest in these three tiers, 10, 20, 70%. 10% in algorithms, 20% in technology, 70% in people, which actually they should invest. But they really struggle finding meaningful use cases for this technology. They struggle to implement this technology in a way that it does drive their business forward. And I believe from all the conversations that I've had and the personal experience that I've made working with leaders and companies, yeah, if you chase AI as a shiny object, I'm not surprised, right? That you're not seeing the value. If you don't connect it to your business strategy, if you don't know why am I actually doing this, and how do I measure if this pays off? So companies are struggling. They're struggling today with these 9 topics that I mentioned earlier. Now imagine if this happens, right? The cost drops, it gets more achievable and more attainable. Not only your company can use AI at a lower cost, but your competitors can, new startups can. So all of a sudden, you can expect that your manager and your senior leaders will stand at your cubicle or in your next all hands and say, well, what are we doing about AI? We need to figure out this agentic AI or whatever it may be. Well, the problem is 2/3 aren't even prepared today. Right? So I wouldn't be surprised if we see, again, a couple of quarters from now, the Gartner hype cycle saying we're really headed now into the trough of disillusionment of agents because companies are not seeing the value. But just because it's cheap and everybody else is doing it and you haven't been doing it yet, if you don't connect it to your business strategy, if there's no measurable value, of course, again, you're not seeing the benefits. So there's a risk of sunk cost, again, at a faster pace and probably at a higher amount than before. If companies are struggling today, they'll struggle even more with the new technology. So again, to me, it's more important that we build good leadership, that we understand what all those challenges are. Because I think we can overcome these blockers to finding the right AI scenarios, features, use cases by following, for example, these 6 things, right? First of all, what's the business problem that we're trying to solve? Ideally, it's not just happier employees or fewer clicks, right? They're nice, but at the end of the day, nobody pays for that. Your finance stakeholder, your VP of finance, doesn't pay for happier employees. Right? They pay for faster processing, better KPIs. We get the money faster. We can invest it more smartly, things like that. But then how do we quantify it? And is there a key performance indicator that our business is measured by? Or is there a process performance indicator? It takes 30 days to collect the money from our customers. How can we get that down to 25, to 15, maybe, with some smart strategies? And how can we measure that? And ideally, how can we measure it using technology? So whenever your boss comes to you and says, what is it now? How has it improved? I need to give an update to my boss that you don't need to scramble and say, oh, well, let me call Bob and we need to figure out and run the latest report and get the data and I can give it to you. But with tools like process mining, process intelligence, that you can see what are those KPIs that our AI model and our AI product makes a measurable impact to. Securing stakeholder buy-in. A lot of times you see at the beginning of a project, a lot of enthusiasm. Yes, we need to do this. Super important. Let's get started. Let's get the data. Oh, well, and then it takes some time. You need to jump through some legal hoops. Maybe the data isn't as good as you thought it was. By the time you have something that's usable, the stakeholder has moved on somewhere else, or there's some budget cuts or some reshuffling, and you're like, are we still doing this? Does anybody still want this or need this? So you need to make sure that throughout that project, you keep your stakeholder engaged and involved, and you make sure that, yes, they still want this and they need this. And we can show results along the way. It's not just all about building your own applications. I think we've seen this with machine learning. We've seen this with generative AI. A lot of times, companies certainly want to experiment with these things. Technologists want to experiment. I'm a technologist too, and I get excited about all these opportunities and getting my hands on the things and trying them out. But in a business, you already have a lot of effort around change management, bringing your people along on that journey. This AI thing that I'm now supposed to use, how do I even know that this does what it's supposed to? And aren't they going to get rid of me anyways once that thing is trained and operational, right? So there's a lot of distrust and suspicion. So around this change management, hey, we're doing this for good reasons. I was working with a large pharma company a couple of years ago on matching incoming payments to invoices, and they brought their subject matter experts along on their journey from the very beginning. They said, hey, look at our KPIs. One of them in finance is days of sales outstanding. How long does it take until we get the money? We need to improve that. But we won't be able to improve it fast enough and in a scalable way by just adding people. And you're probably doing a lot of work that you don't enjoy. You didn't go to school or didn't get your CPA now to be matching payments to invoices and see, okay, is there any residual? So we can use AI or machine learning to help you do that. And you just look at the ones that are really, really tough. And there are other things that really create more value for the company that are more enjoyable to do. So you have this change management either way. So from that perspective, yes, something like Copilot or something like AI built into applications you use, using those kind of features makes perfect sense. You still need to tell your team, why are we doing this? It's important to the company. Yes, you still have a job, and you need to lead them with empathy. So by starting even further and building your own model, you just add to that complexity until you get to that point where you can actually deploy it. So my recommendation is look at the applications you have that you use. Is there AI in them that we can use that delivers that business benefit, that measurable business value? Can we tie it to a KPI? Yeah, let's explore it. How much does it cost? What's the value? And then do the change management around it. Certainly, if you build your own models or build your own now Gen AI applications, data, as we know, is critically important. Still, right? It's not just a shiny Gen AI that can write poems and generic stuff. Once you use it and you see it's actually pretty generic in what it delivers, unless I give it more specific instructions, unless I give it more specific data, we're all finding, well, actually we do need data still. The last point, involve end users. Like I shared the example from the biopharma company, make sure that people are aware of this from the very beginning and involved and engaged in, like I said, lead with empathy. Why are we doing this and how does it help you, genuinely help you? So to me, those are the 6 pillars of how you can overcome blockers to AI adoption as a leader in a company. Now, I think with generative AI and especially agentic AI, there are a couple of challenges that we need to overcome. Right? At the very basic level, vendors need to deliver technology that works in ways that are reliable. Just plugging in some open source thing that probably works. It doesn't work for a lot of enterprise companies. Basing everything on large language models that might hallucinate, that might make things up, that might go off on a tangent, that might have catastrophic forgetting and don't even know what they said a couple of conversations ago, that's a problem. Right? So we need to get to a point where the technology is robust enough that even the largest and most regulated industries and companies trust this. And then, as an individual, what does it mean for my role if all of a sudden there are apparently these agents that can do research, that research keywords, that research customer profiles, pain points, that create a marketing brief, or that analyze procurement documents, RFPs, maybe they can even create one. Hang on, I used to do that. What's my role now? So there's a lot of change coming and a lot of confusion, a lot of angst. What does it mean for my role? So if you're a leader, you need to lead with empathy and also see what this change actually means and brings. So for me, on the flip side, then that means from strategy to managing that change to, at the bottom again, data that everything is based on is critically important as a leader to keep that in mind and in view. Because your employees will likely think that. Right? Yes, they're giving me some new AI tool, but if I admit that I use it, my boss is just going to dump more stuff on my plate because apparently now I save 20% of my time. Right? For example, Slack did a study in the fall. They found that 48% of respondents said, I actually don't tell my boss that I use AI. Because if I do, I'm very afraid that this is going to be my new reality. Oh, you use ChatGPT for work? Great. So for the extra, 4 hours that you save, how about you work on that special project where you do more? Right? Whether your boss might think that or might say that or not is a different story. So people are thinking about this and are concerned. Now, to bring it back to data, right? That was in the news as well a week or two ago. Right? Elon said, hey, we've exhausted all human-created data for training, nothing left, everything's sucked up into the LLMs. Right? That's it. End of story. Labs are running out of data. Well, we know that's not exactly true. Right? That's maybe the public data or data that's publicly available over the internet. We know where the real value is hidden, right? In our company's data, in our data centers, in our servers, in our databases. And that's far, far greater and far more specific than what LLMs have been fed with. Obviously, they're great at creating language, understanding language, replicating images, audio, video, and so on. But they're not really good at medical documentation. They're not really good at processing and writing doctor's notes about very specific cases or illnesses. They're not really good at writing the exact specifications of your company's product, whether it's a lawnmower, a snowblower, or something much more complex. So we need that data that's actually stored in our systems. That's where the gold mine is. Not in the, we have a system that can read English, speak in English, and pretty much any other language. That's the substance, that's the content. So how can you support AI adoption in your business? To me, if you're a data professional, I would say look at some of these agentic AI frameworks. Many of these companies obviously have trials or some free tier version. Microsoft came out with a framework called Autogen. They have some Docker containers. If you're familiar with Docker, you can install those and experiment. Another good one is a startup called Crew AI. They do actually multi-agent systems, so not just have one agent, but several, and orchestrate them. So you can build a team of marketing experts or specialists, one that focuses on keyword research, another one on pain points, another one that's a really, really good writer, and maybe someone that coordinates this and reviews and says, well, does it actually make sense what these agents are doing? So have another agent control it. Because you'll find that these tools are getting easier and easier to use, and whether it's for data analysis, visualization, things that would take us a considerable amount of time, even investing the time to explore how can I do this more efficiently with that new technology, I think is time well spent. So look at what do these tools offer, how can I use them in my business as a data professional would be one of the key recommendations for me. So that's 30 minutes are up.
You can go on for another 5 or 10.
Good, thank you. So as leaders, right, you will have team members that are concerned that if you deploy AI, it just means you're going to give me more work. So I'm not going to tell you that I use AI. You need to raise awareness also across your organization that, guess what, even though AI, Gen AI, Agentic AI are the big headlines, we still need to focus on data because that's where the value is in our company and for our company. So if we combine these generic capabilities with the specific data we have, we can build something that's really, really meaningful, that makes a measurable impact to our business. And you should encourage your team members and also your peers, hey, go try this out. Right? Many companies by now have a Gen AI policy that governs how employees are allowed or supposed to use Gen AI. Right? Don't put confidential data there, don't put personal identifiable information there. We've seen cases from Amazon, Samsung, and others in the news early last year, so please don't do that. But within certain guardrails, please use AI because we need to become more proficient individually and as a team. And so if there are concerns that if I use AI, my boss is going to think that I'm slacking or that I'm less competent or that I end up with more work, we have a responsibility to eradicate those thoughts and concerns. So to me, those are the big things, obviously, that we can do. Practice, try it out, encourage others to do that too. Because I think at the end of the day, with agents, we all will be a leader. Right? Because we will give a goal to an agent or to a group of agents. So we need to communicate really, really well. We need to understand what is it that I want this thing to do. Much like today, if you're in a manager role or a leadership role, you give a task to an individual on your team, or you give a task to the entire team. So communication, what is it that I actually want to achieve, is really, really important. And then reviewing information, directing, right? Critically thinking, is this what this group of agents presents to me? Is this true? Is this factual? Does that even make sense? Or does it just breed like a really, really plausible story, but the facts are totally off? So over time, I think we'll see a development and a progression, much like this. Today we have single agents and maybe even some multi-agents that work in a team. We'll see over time, the marketing team of AI agents collaborate with the finance team of agents and the sales teams of agents to figure out how much budget do I actually have to run the campaign. In sales team, what customers should I show these ads? Should I show this content to? Because maybe they're in a high-value deal cycle, they're about to close, we need to just get them over the finish line. So having teams of these agents work together, I think will be one of the next steps. And lastly, think this even further, spin this further, intercompany. So you have a team of these agents, the procurement agents that your customer has, and they send out requests for proposal, maybe for components for your new lawnmower. And your company receives that proposal. You have a team of agents in your sales department that takes that RFP and that process it. What does the customer actually want? What products do we have? How can we support this? How much does it cost? When can we deliver it? And yes, ideally, you still have a human in your sales team review this and so on. But I believe over time, and again, all of that hinges on the reliable technology that vendors provide to us, not just the narratives. All of that is where I see things will be going over time. So from one to a team, to multiple teams, to teams between companies. And again, that's why I think leadership is so important. But I also think, companies that are stumbling into this or chasing it because AI agents is what I see in the news every day now, you'll probably find something like this that actually it's a much heavier lift than they thought it would be. Right? So to wrap it up, if you're a leader, focus on 3 things. Focus on, obviously, trends, the big things, what's happening, not the weekly news cycles and will we have AGI or OpenAI's version or DeepMind's version of AGI. But what does it mean? What does it mean for our business? Where's our industry going? Where's my business function going? And how can I help and support them? Certainly also focus on people because the technology has a real impact on how we work. in each of our roles, right? So making sure on one hand you encourage your peers and your team members to use the technology and do that responsibly is important. And lastly, it all comes back to data. Right? Whether we want to realize it or not, whether our senior leaders are excited about a data strategy and data governance and data management or not, that's the fundamental things we need to get back to. So to me, to bring it back, in AI and game shows, timing is critical and finding that right timing to do the things. So you are competitive. So you do deliver a measurable business value. Those are the important things we need to focus on in that agentic future. Now, if you'd love to learn more about it, we'll have a few books outside. If you'd like to buy some and learn about the details of those 9 steps that I mentioned. It's been a pleasure sharing that with you, and I would love to learn more from you during our next networking as well, what you feel has resonated and what some of the challenges are that you're running into. So thanks again for the opportunity.